Hello. Welcome to the complete history of Barry Buckle, from the horrifying Red Smeg slasher, up to the dramatic conclusion of Remnants of the Ranch. Let's go. Born into the shadowed lineage of Simon Cuckle, Barry Buckle was the second son of a family bound by isolation and survival. Raised in the forgotten Uckle village, a place untouched by time and mercy, Barry's childhood was a crucible of hunger, silence, and solitude, filled with pain and abuse. His only solace came from his older brother, Jimmy Chuckle, whose care was the only ember in a world otherwise cold and indifferent. The two were frequently told not to visit the nearby caves of the village. At 17, the brothers ventured into that cave near the village, drawn by curiosity, but soon consumed by something far older and darker. That cave was the cradle of the Podzol scourge, a sentient plague that would one day unravel the world. Trapped for 4 years, Barry and Jimmy endured, sustained only by contaminated water and the virus itself. When they emerged, they were no longer boys. Jimmy retained his intellect. Barry, however, had lost his voice, his ability to connect, his humanity. Together, they carved out a grim existence at Nugget Ranch, turning their trauma into enterprise. Nuggetization, harvesting and selling dismembered corpses, became their trade. It was grotesque, and Barry's humanity was completely gone. That all shattered when they crossed paths with a group of campers, among them a man who called himself Johnny Johnny, later revealed to be Eoskal, the Podzol's chosen vessel. The brothers orchestrated the group's demise, whilst Jimmy pretended to be a somewhat decent guy. Somehow Eoskal survived, and he returned, this time, also infected by the Podzol scourge. The second encounter was apocalyptic. Jimmy was murdered brutally. Eoskal stabbed him in the neck so hard that the Podzol didn't even manage to heal it. Barry was knocked unconscious and left to rot, broken and alone in the cave that had once birthed his curse. Months passed. Then came Skitty. Skitty didn't just rescue Barry, he rebuilt him, putting him through a series of brutal trials designed to purge the Podzol's grip. Barry was reshaped. One trial inflicted severe brain damage, but the virus regenerated the lost tissue, ironically restoring Barry's cognitive function. For the first time in years, he could speak, he could think, he could feel. Skitty released him into the world, and Barry chose redemption. He was given a saloon in Valentine, earning an honest wage. He married Piano Puckle and fathered a son, Boris. But happiness proved fleeting. Piano left, taking Boris and forbidding Barry from seeing him. It was a wound deeper than any Podzol scar. Then came the message, from Jimmy, long dead, speaking of a relic known as the Chuck piece. Barry rallied a crew, Skitty, Eoskal, Dr. Labman Jr., and the legendary sniper. For a time, it seemed as if conflict was no more. Eoskal and Barry had forgiven each other, but Barry knew too little about the real world, not foreseeing the eventual betrayal. They journeyed into the great desert, seeking the artifact, but betrayal struck. Eoskal turned on them. Skitty was confirmed dead. Labman and Sniper vanished. Barry survived, but his memory fractured. Barry awoke in the desert, alone once more. The sun was merciless, but not as cruel as the pain behind his eyes, a searing echo of the Podzol flash that had struck him down. His body trembled, not from heat, but from grief. Skitty lay lifeless beside him, the one soul who had once believed Barry could be more than a monster. That belief now lay in the sand, bleeding into the dust. Then came Reuben Goon, a lawman from St. Denis, drawn by the trail of devastation left in Eoskal's wake. Reuben saw the corpse, saw Barry, and saw guilt. He arrested Barry without ceremony, dragging him to Guantanamo Bay, a prison for the forsaken. There, Barry was left to rot once again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Eoskal had claimed the Chuck piece, and with it, rewrote reality. 95% of humanity was migrated to a mirror timeline, one untouched by Podzol, one clean, sterile, and silent. Those deemed unworthy remained behind. Barry, Reuben, the broken, the flawed, the forgotten. In the silence of their shared cell, something unexpected bloomed. Understanding. Reuben, once Barry's captor, became his confidant. They spoke of loss, of justice, of the weight of survival. Barry, for the first time, found kinship in someone who hadn't known the cave, the ranch, or the curse. It was fragile, but it was real. Then came Jim Mick, a figure cloaked in mystery, but burning with purpose. He freed them, not just from prison, but from despair. Jim had seen the threads unraveling and knew Ioskel's plan, to delete the original timeline entirely. Barry was no longer just a survivor. He was now a guardian of reality itself. Together, Barry, Jim, and Reuben searched for Ioskel, chasing whispers across fractured lands. But before they could act, Ioskel struck. From the shadows, he assassinated Reuben, clean, silent, merciless. Barry felt something rupture inside him. Not rage, not grief. Something older, something colder. Ioskel had hoped this would break Barry, but it didn't. Barry endured. He buried Reuben with trembling hands, and a vow etched into his soul. He would not become what the virus wanted. He would not become what Ioskel believed. Barry and Jim retreated to Nugget Ranch, the birthplace of Barry's darkest chapter. But Ioskel followed, and the battle that ensued was cataclysmic. Barry was struck down, his body torn and broken. Death was certain, but the Podzol, now supercharged, now symbiotic, refused to let him go. It rebuilt him, molecule by molecule, memory by memory. Barry Buckle did not die that day, but something did. The man who emerged from the wreckage was no longer just a bartender, a brother, or a survivor. He was a paradox, cursed and chosen, broken and whole, human and something else. And the timeline still trembles. In the frozen wastes of Coulter, Barry Buckle lay broken, his body torn, his soul frayed. Jim Mack had dragged him from the jaws of death, trusting in the very curse that had once damned Barry, the Podzol. It was a gamble born of desperation, and it worked. Slowly, painfully, Barry began to heal. But Jim did not truly. He kept them alive with frost-bitten hands and hollow eyes, his spirit eroding beneath the weight of despair. While they clung to survival, Ioskel was forging apocalypse. He had allied with Goen Baker, a former associate of Dr. Labman turned traitor. Together, they birthed an army, clones of Jim Mick, twisted reflections of the man who had once defied fate. Standard goons followed. Chaos spread like wildfire, and the timeline itself began to tremble. Weeks passed. Barry rose from the ice, no longer a victim, but a vessel of vengeance. He and Jim rode out to avenge Reuben Goon, whose death still echoed in Barry's bones. Along the way, a miracle. Labman had survived. He had slipped from the desert's carnage and buried himself in research. Barry wept, not from weakness, but from relief. He was not alone. Labman shared what he had learned, how to fight the Podzol, how to sever its grip. Armed with this knowledge, Barry and Jim rode to Fort Mercer. What followed was a night of blood and fury. Jim tore through the goons with righteous wrath. Barry faced the clones, each one a mockery of Jim, each one a reminder of what could be lost. Then Ioskel emerged. He seized Jim and stabbed him, again and again, until Barry could no longer hear his friend's breath. Something inside Barry shattered. He charged, not to win, not to survive, but to hurt, to make Ioskel bleed. Their battle was cataclysmic. Podzol flashes lit the sky like dying stars. Rage ruptured the timeline. Reality buckled. And then, impossibly, Jim returned. Labman's contingency moonshine, infused with anti-Podzol properties, had revived him. With one final act, Jim reset Ioskel's power, severing his link to the timeline and halting the collapse. The war was over. Ioskel was defeated. Barry, Jim, and Labman survived. But survival came at a cost. Barry was no longer just a man. He was a myth forged in frost and fire, grief and rage. Jim bore scars deeper than flesh. Labman had seen the edge of knowledge and the abyss beyond. The timeline was safe, for now. After the fall of Ioskel and the salvation of the timeline, Barry and Jim Mack shared a rare moment of peace. For the first time in decades, there was no war to fight, no curse to outrun, just the quiet hum of life returning. A month passed. Then Jim returned to Barry's saloon in Valentine, where laughter masked old wounds and whiskey flowed like memory. Barry had a request, one born not of vengeance, but of love. He asked Jim to cross into the mirror timeline to find Boris, his son, the boy he'd never known. Jim saw the pain behind Barry's eyes, the longing buried beneath years of survival and sacrifice. He accepted without hesitation. That final act of brotherhood marked the end of an era. For 25 years, Barry lived in peace, or something like it. He kept Skiddy's promise alive, turning the saloon into a haven for the lost and the weary. He wore a mask of mirth, a clown's grin over a heart still cracked. But beneath the jokes and jests, the ache never left. Then, one day, the sky tore open. A black hole, born of Eoskel's lingering tampering, ripped Barry from his world and hurled him into the sun-scorched chaos of Mexico. Alone, disoriented and hunted, Barry clawed his way through the dust. There, he met a man who would change everything, John Marston. Together, they escaped the inferno. In each other, they found a kindred spirit, men shaped by violence, haunted by loss, and driven by a code they could never quite name. Their bond was forged in fire and sealed with laughter. For Barry, it was a flicker of the old days, a ghost of Jim's loyalty reborn. After their escape, they checked the mail, an act so mundane it felt sacred. There, they found a message from Piano Puckle, Barry's ex-wife. It was waiting in Coulter. Barry and John made the pilgrimage, braving the cold and the ghosts. They found the letter. But peace, as always, was fleeting. That was when the sky cracked again. Eoskel had returned. This time, not alone. He had joined forces with Butterscotch, an eldritch god whose hunger knew no bounds. Together, they unleashed the Podzol Purge, a ritual of annihilation. Across the world, the infected rose, twisted, shrieking echoes of humanity, their veins pulsing with black rot. John was horrified. Barry was not surprised. They fought side by side, protecting settlements, forging alliances, saving who they could. Barry moved like a man fulfilling prophecy. He had always known the end would come, but he had not known he would face it with a friend. Then came the final reckoning. In the great desert, where it had all begun, Eoskel attacked. The battle was brutal, a storm of blood and flame. But Barry and John endured. Together, they brought Eoskel to his knees. And in that moment, when vengeance could have been final, they begged, not for mercy, for hope. They pleaded with Eoskel to end the purge, to spare what remained, to choose creation over destruction. And for the first time in a long, long while, the world held its breath. Eoskel, ever the architect of despair, offered them a clue, a sliver of hope buried in deception. It was not mercy. It was a test, a trap. He allowed himself to be captured, only to detonate his own body in a cataclysmic Podzol explosion, incinerating both Barry and John Marston. But Eoskel took John's body with him. Why? That answer still lingers in the dark. Barry should have died. But fate, or something older, intervened. Arthur Morgan, ghost of a bygone era, a man who knew the weight of redemption, found Barry in the void between life and death. He carried him to New Vice City, a distant island untouched by the Podzol plague. There, the two men spoke of war, of loss, of the impossible task ahead, and of John. Barry, refusing to rest, stormed Eoskel's island fortress. But the halls were empty, save for goons and a monstrous bear, bloated with Podzol corruption. The battle was savage. Barry fought like a man possessed, but the bear left him broken, unconscious, vulnerable. Eoskel returned, dragging Barry back to the mainland. There, Barry awoke to a miracle. John Marston, alive, scarred, but breathing. Somehow, the Podzol had not claimed him. But the reunion was short-lived. Eoskel had them both in his grasp. It should have ended there. But Arthur had followed. Through fire, through sea, through nightmare. He struck like thunder, freeing Barry and John in the nick of time. The three men, now bound by blood and fate, learned of the Butterscotch tomes, ancient relics capable of ending the Podzol purge once and for all. Together, they carved a path through the infected wastelands, their bond forged in battle. But the cost was steep. At the gates of the ritual site, Eoskul struck again. Arthur, ever the martyr, stayed behind to hold him off. He fought with everything he had, buying Barry and John the time they needed. As they fled, Barry sensed the inevitable. Eoskul was following, and someone had to face him. Barry chose himself. He turned to John, eyes heavy with memory and longing. He spoke not of war, but of family, of the life John still had, the one Barry never truly grasped. He told John to finish the mission, to live. Then he turned to face the end. On a wind-scoured hill, Barry and Eoskul clashed one final time. Pods all surged through the air like black lightning. The earth cracked beneath their fury. Barry fought with everything he had. But it wasn't enough. Eoskul stood over him, triumphant, ready to end it. And then, light. A bolt of celestial energy tore through the sky, striking Eoskul with divine precision. It was Skitty, not as a man, but as something more. His true form, light years away, watching, waiting. In Barry's darkest moment, Skitty answered. Eoskul fell. John reached the ritual site and completed the rite. The butterscotch purge was halted. The world, though scarred, was spared. Barry survived, but he was no longer the same. None of them were. The war was over. The timeline, for now, was safe. But the myth of Barry Buckle, the man who bore the weight of a curse, who chose love over vengeance, who stood against gods and monsters, would echo through every world that followed. John Marston returned to his family, but peace did not follow. Though the purge had ended, the world felt hollow. Every morning, he walked to Buckle Bar, hoping to see Barry again. But the saloon remained untouched. Dusty floorboards, expired food, and silence thick enough to drown in. Barry was gone, and John didn't know if he was dead, lost, or simply done. He kept coming anyway. Meanwhile, Barry Buckle was very much alive, but not free. He had sought out Eoskul, not with rage, but with resolve. He came not to fight, but to face, to confront the weight of his past, the lives he had taken, the son he had lost, and the man he had become. He offered no excuses, only truth. Eoskul listened. There was no forgiveness in his eyes, only calculation. Barry had taken everything from him once, his family, his humanity. But there was one name that changed the air between them. Boris, Barry's son, Eoskul's ghost. It was Boris who softened the edge, the boy who had never known his father, yet still carried his blood. Eoskul saw in Barry not redemption, but consequence. And in that moment, he offered Barry a chance, not out of mercy, but curiosity. If Barry could truly face what he had done, if he could carry the weight without collapsing, then perhaps he deserved to live. It was not a pardon. It was a test. Barry accepted. In the strange, shifting folds of a pocket dimension conjured by Eoskul, Barry Buckle faced the ghosts that had long haunted him. The cave, the ranch, the purge, the son he never knew, the lives he had taken. Each memory was a blade, and Barry bled willingly. He did not fight the pain. He embraced it, and in doing so, he emerged changed. Peace, however fleeting, awaited him on the other side. Barry reunited with John Marston at Buckle Bar. The saloon, once a hollow shell, came alive again. Regulars returned, drawn by Barry's infectious grin and the warmth that had once defined the place. Beneath the laughter, Barry and John began to truly know each other, not as warriors, but as men. They shared stories, scars, and silence. They visited Arthur Morgan's grave often, unable to move past his sacrifice. Not yet. Then, one day, Eoskul appeared. He came not with fury, but with urgency. Butterscotch had returned, furious that Eoskul had failed to uphold his end of the bargain. The eldritch god was bleeding Boris's timeline dry, and Barry could not ignore it. He agreed to help, not for Eoskul, but for his son. John followed. Together, they returned to Nugget Ranch. The fire crackled, whiskey flowed, and buried truths surfaced. Barry, in a moment of clarity, remembered what he had done under Podzol hypnosis. He had killed Eoskul's family. The hatred Eoskul carried was not born of ideology. It was personal, devastatingly so. They shared memories, not to erase the past, but to understand it. To survive butterscotch, they had to stand together, and for a moment, it seemed possible. Then came Goen Baker. Twisted by betrayal, Goen had consumed the anti-Podzol moonshine, weaponizing it in ways no one thought possible. He ambushed Barry and Eoskal, capturing them both. The moonshine, once a tool of salvation, had become a prison. Barry and Eoskal, once enemies, now found themselves bound by a common threat, and the world held its breath once more. John Marston was not captured. That alone changed everything. He crept through Nugget Ranch like a shadow, eliminating Goen Baker's goons with surgical precision. Each step was a prayer, each takedown, a promise. He reached Barry and Eoskal, hope flickering in his eyes, only for Goen to emerge from the dark and fire a shot that tore through John's liver. Barry saw it instantly. The wound, the blood, the fading light in his friend's eyes. Something inside Barry snapped. He became a storm, rage incarnate. Goen Baker was no longer a man, but a symbol of every betrayal, every loss, every moment Barry had been forced to watch someone he loved slip away. Barry tore into him, fists and blade, fury and grief. Eoskal joined him, not as a rival, but as a fellow survivor. Together, they crushed Goen's revolt, an uprising built on bitterness and broken promises. Goen died screaming. The ranch fell silent. They rushed to John. He was fading fast. But there was one chance, a small injection of Podzol, enough to trigger its regenerative properties without corrupting his soul. Eoskal hesitated. The virus had taken so much. But he thought of John's family, of his own, of the father he never got to be. He agreed. John lived, and in that moment, the three men, once enemies, once strangers, became something more. Allies, brothers, survivors. But Barry couldn't risk losing John again. He asked him to stay behind, to protect his family, to live the life Barry had never known. John accepted, not out of fear, but out of faith. He believed in Barry. He believed in Eoskal. He believed they could end this. Barry and Eoskal turned to Labman's portal technology. They studied it, dissected it, mastered it. And when the time came, they stepped through, into the new timeline, where Butterscotch waited, wearing the vessel of Dr. Labman like a mask. The final confrontation loomed, but this time, Barry wasn't alone. Now when it comes to abilities, Barry has many. Podzol regeneration. Exposure to the Podzol virus granted Barry a unique regenerative ability. Though it nearly destroyed his mind, it also rebuilt his brain, restoring lost cognitive function and allowing him to survive otherwise fatal wounds. Berserker rage. When emotionally triggered, especially by the loss or endangerment of loved ones, Barry enters a near-feral state, unleashing devastating physical strength and brutality. Podzol resonance. Barry has a deep, almost spiritual connection to the Podzol. He can sense its presence, resist its influence, and even manipulate its energy in rare moments of clarity. Emotional immunity. Through years of trauma and healing, Barry has developed a psychological resilience that allows him to face eldritch horrors, memory trials, and existential dread without breaking. He is proficient with small firearms and melee weaponry, but usually doesn't require such tools in combat. He is agile, yet powerful, graceful, yet chaotic. Barry's goals are simple. Protect Boris. Above all else, Barry's driving force is the safety and future of his son, Boris. Every decision, every sacrifice, is filtered through this paternal lens. Atone for his past. From nuggetization to the murder of Eoskal's family, Barry carries a heavy burden. His journey is one of redemption, not erasure. End the Podzol curse. Though it saved him, Barry sees the Podzol as a cosmic affliction that must be understood, contained, or destroyed. Honor the fallen. Skiddy, Jimmy, Arthur. Barry's life is shaped by the ghosts of those who believed in him. He keeps their memory alive through action, ritual, and storytelling. Barry likes many things, but some key things are: whiskey by the fire, a symbol of peace, reflection, and camaraderie. Storytelling. Barry finds solace in sharing tales, his own and others, as a way to process trauma and connect. Music, especially piano, a bittersweet reminder of Piano Puckle and the life that could have been. Quiet mornings at Buckle Bar, the stillness before the world wakes, when he can pretend everything is okay. Crafty birds in St. Denis, too. What does he dislike, you may ask? Betrayal. Having been betrayed by allies and his own mind, Barry has little tolerance for deception. Wasted potential. He mourns not just the dead, but the lives they could have lived. The Podzol's corruption. Though it saved him, he despises what it's done to others and what it almost made him become. Being alone. Beneath the jokes and bravado, Barry fears abandonment more than death. Barry Buckle is a masterclass in mythic character design, an emotionally complex figure whose greatness lies not in invincibility, but in vulnerability, resilience, and transformation. He begins as a broken man, shaped by trauma, silence, and monstrous deeds. Yet his journey is one of relentless self-confrontation. Barry doesn't seek redemption through grand gestures. He earns it through quiet sacrifice, brutal honesty, and the courage to face the consequences of his past. His powers, born from the very curse that nearly destroyed him, are a metaphor for his inner struggle. He is both the wound and the healing. What makes Barry truly compelling is his capacity for connection. His bond with John Marston, his reverence for Skitty, his grief for Jimmy, and his longing for Boris all reveal a man who, despite everything, still chooses love over vengeance. He is mythic, not because he is perfect, but because he is willing to change. Barry Buckle is the kind of character who reminds us that even the most cursed souls can become protectors, that redemption is not a destination, but a choice made again and again, and that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who never stop trying.